what I love about Joseph Smith is he had so much power, quote unquote, but he didn't exercise that as a tyrant, right? He would set up, there was a council meeting in Nauvoo where he got up into all the members. He was like, do you have any problems with me? Like, literally, if you know of something you don't like that I'm doing, say it. And then he pulled up his first presidency. He was like, first counselor, any problems with him? And people were welcomed, like, speak, share if you have a concern, and let's talk about it, which I just think is a really good example of leadership for, whether you're a parent or no matter what kind of a leader you are, just learning from Joseph Smith's example, how he exercised authority and how he didn't.
Welcome, everyone, to the podcast this week. And you might recognize this young lady here. This is Hannah Stoddard. And she's going to be joining me here this week as we go through lesson number 30. Mm-hmm. So this is Doctrine and Covenants sections 81, 82, and 83. And then we'll do 84. It's going to be awesome next week. So as you know, we are expecting that you would have already read the manual and have... will participate in your gospel doctrine classes and so forth, but this is going to be a little more of a deep dive into some of the just certain areas in these passages. And Hannah, I'm so grateful for you to be able to come here and today and to share some of your information and your research and things there. So I'm excited about this. So let's just jump right into it.
Yeah, let's do it.
Well, first off, introduce yourself a little bit. I'm not sure how much everybody knows you.
Okay, so I'm the director of the Joseph Smith Foundation. We've done about 7 to 8 documentaries, and
awesome documentaries. Amazing. Yes.
I think so, but I'm kind of biased, so I think someone else should be doing the introductions here. But and then 3 books, soon to be 4. And so it started, my father started the foundation. It was a family project. And then now it's expanded to many volunteers. People that literally, they're not paid. They just literally sacrifice their time and their talents because they're very passionate about getting good history and good information out there to defend the restoration. And just
President Nelson said good inspiration comes from good information. So that's a really important aspect of it too. That we have sources that we can rely on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and a lot of times, and it was always a saying in our house growing up that if you change history, you change doctrine. Which you notice, that's what every time any dictator goes in, he just wipes out the museums, he destroys the books, the history, just wipe it out. Because if you take away someone's identity, then all of a sudden you can completely redefine what they believe and everything. So that's what we see in history. They try to change the history and everything. So if we can get back to good history and good information, then...
It's easier to manipulate people when they don't understand who they are.
Right.
Which is so interesting that we, as children of God, this is such a important knowledge that if we think that we're instead children of apes and slime, it makes a difference on how you look at things and how you look at us.
Yes.
That we're just another species on the planet. We just happen to be kind of ruling, if you will, right now, but in a million years from now it'll be something else.
Whereas on the other hand, it's not just negative, but it's also good information can help you make positive changes, build better things. So anyways.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so we're going to jump into section 81 here, and this is in regard to the revelation that was back in March of 1832. Yeah. So we're going to be taking a couple of jumps in time here in these revelations through the beginning part of 1832. Mm-hmm. So in section 51, let's go ahead and 81. This is to my servant Frederick G Williams. Now, just a little interesting side note, and that is that about this time frame, when Joseph had this revelation, Frederick G Williams was also kind of his scribe, Joseph Smith's scribe, and he had and Oliver Cowdery had been tasked with writing kind of the earliest history of the church, and he did that in a series of 8 letters, and in those 8 letters he did this. He said that Joseph Smith's help was indispensable, which is actually true because he has actual, quotes from conversations that Joseph Smith had with like some of the Nephite prophets and things in there. Well, there's only one way he would have known those, right? And that is that Joseph had to tell him. And Joseph was so impressed with Oliver's writings or whatever that he had them published in every publication available at the time. Mm-hmm. So it was in the Times and Seasons, the Evening Morning Star. Mm-hmm. And in this particular case, Frederick G Williams was actually busy writing Oliver Cowdery's 8 letters, because they had to handwrite everything, right? Yeah. And so they had to, writing all those 8 letters into Joseph Smith's own personal journal, which happened also about the same time. Right. So that's a little bit about Frederick G Williams. You had a couple of things that you wanted to talk about there.
Interesting on this section is Frederick G Williams was not the first person called for this position in the first presidency. There'd actually been someone else, Jesse Gause, who'd been called, and he wasn't. And he didn't fulfill his calling, so he actually ended up getting excommunicated. So Frederick G Williams is kind of a sad story because he ends up following too. And my heart just goes out to Joseph Smith. I mean, Joseph Smith loved Frederick G Williams so much he named one of his kids after him. I mean, the prophet of the dispensation names one of his kids after you. And then, so, it's just, I think history is important because as we go through these sections, if it's just like, okay, names, whatever, like over the top of my head. But if we understand a little bit, okay, who are these people? What's the context? But, do you want to just dive right into the verses here?
Yes, okay. Let's do it.
One thing is just the key in verse 2 where he says, the keys of the kingdom always belong to the presidency of the high priesthood. And keys is just something that's just really important to understand, that there are keys, there are authority, it's ordered, everything in God's system is ordered, and that's important just especially in these tumultuous times in the last days where everybody's got different ideas and know where you're supposed to be.
It's kind of whatever you want is that's what goes.
Yes, okay. Right. Yeah. But at the same time, I think it's important to separate there's authority and power. And just really fast, authority is God says, okay, I'm going to give you this authority, but there's not going to be, but power is conditioned on righteousness. And we see that in D&C 121. It's conditioned on whether you're being a righteous leader. And so that power is only going to be there with the authority if they're righteous. But the authority, I mean, Caiaphas still had the authority in the Jews' day, and he was putting the Son of God to death, right? And it says right in the New Testament, he was sitting on Moses' seat, right? He's out there like prophesying even, and so I think it's important, and especially in Joseph Smith's day, Joseph Smith was so big on everyone having a voice. It was not democratic, but it was a democratic republic type of government principles, even in the church. So all the members even had a voice, and it was this thing of, instead of just blindly following, it was all the members coming together and sustaining, saying, okay, how can I help these leaders do their job, but they're not perfect, so how can we all work together? And Joseph Smith, in other words,
we all have kind of a part about that.
Yes.
And that's something I think that we forget, is that each one of us as members of the church have kind of a part in the overall directive or direction that the church is going.
Right.
And so if we don't do our part and we basically turn all of that over to our leaders and say, okay, well,
just turn my brain off. Yeah.
I'll just kind of follow whatever they do.
Yeah.
That can get you a certain, to a certain point, but you really, we need to learn how to step it up. Yeah. And to be better members.
Yeah. It's the same thing in the nation, right? If you're just like, okay, whatever they say, it just doesn't work. And Joseph Smith, what I love about Joseph Smith is he had so much power, quote unquote, but he didn't exercise that as a tyrant, right? He would set up, there was a council meeting in Nauvoo where he got up into all the members. He was like, do you have any problems with me? Like, literally, if you know of something you don't like that I'm doing, say it. And then he pulled up his first presidency. He was like, first counselor, any problems with him? And people were welcomed, like, speak, share if you have a concern, and let's talk about it, which I just think is a really good example of leadership for, whether you're a parent or no matter what kind of a leader you are, just learning from Joseph Smith's example how he exercised authority and how he didn't.
Exactly. So that's how I look at that from the standpoint. For example, let's say a city council person or a police officer or something like that. They've been given authority to do their jobs, but they can do it well, or they can do it not very well, right? I mean,
a father in a home is a good example because people can see that. I mean, a father can be given stewardship over children, but he can
be a bad dad.
Yeah.
Or can be a good dad. That's right. That's right. And then luckily you're blessed with good dad.
Yes.
So, okay. All right. So that's a shout out to you.
All the good dads. And if you're not, then, just kidding.
Okay.
Be a good leader.
All right, James. Okay, there we go. All right. So anything else you wanted to talk about in 81?
I think I really like verse 5 that talks about, he says, I've appointed you to succor the weak and lift up the hands which hang down and strengthen the feeble knees. Just everything about, again, priesthood or power in God's system is not about well, I'm in charge and so I sit on a throne and I tell you all of you what to do. Literally, the greatest is the least. And so...
Servant of all.
Right. And so this is something we got to understand about the priesthood. You're given... a man is given priesthood to lay down his life. And this is the opposite. You started out the beginning of this discussion just talking about Darwinism, basically. Do we come from slime? And it's interesting how Darwinism celebrates this idea of the strong survive and the weak die.
Die out.
Because the strong are going to crush the weak, and that's just how nature is, right? But the gospel of Jesus Christ is the complete opposite. In the gospel of Jesus Christ, the strongest die so that the weak can survive. So you think about Jesus Christ, the fittest of all. If we're talking about survival of the fittest, right? Jesus Christ, the fittest of all, died for the unfit, And so that's how we're supposed to think in terms of a family or in terms of the church. It's the most fit of all. Those with the most influence, the most power, the greatest gifts and talents, they need to lay down their life for those underneath.
Or be willing to.
Yeah.
They don't have to lay down their life, but they have to be willing to do that. Yeah.
And I guess when I say lay down my life, I'm thinking day to day.
Right.
Every day you make sacrifices so that those who are weak, so that person calls and you're I really want to sleep right now, we've all been
really busy.
Yes. And you're okay, I'm going to put myself aside to strengthen the feeble knees. And that's real priesthood. So when people are always well, men are given priesthood and this whole debate, right, with women, and you're okay, we're misunderstanding what priesthood is and what it's supposed to be for.
Right. I think that's one of the things, though, that about priesthood that is really important, and that is to understand that to exercise the priesthood, you really can't exercise it. Well, you can't exercise it for your own wants and needs and desires.
It's meant
to focus out to other people. So if you're exercising your priesthood, you're actually going to be helping to bless other people's lives.
Yeah. You're a servant.
And one of the things I find is interesting is that almost every time when Christ would be introduced to someone else or coming to the Nephites or whatever, what was one of the first things he'd always do? He would heal them.
Yes.
He would say, "Okay, bring me your lame and you're sick and you're afflicted and so forth. Bring me your halt and your everybody who had issues, right?"
Yes.
And that's part of our physical existence here is to have issues and learn how to deal with those kind of things.
Unfortunately.
And we have we can relate to maybe some of that a little bit, but he would heal them. Before he would really even teach. He gathered all the people and said, "Okay, bring me everybody." The
ministry of healing cannot be separated from the ministry of the gospel.
Yeah.
I'm not going to get on a soapbox about that, but I'm really passionate.
But you look at the lepers and so forth over there. Before he even taught them anything, he would heal them.
Yes.
So that's an interesting thing, to succor the weak and to lift up the hands which hang down.
Yeah.
I've been so dog tired before.
No.
That you're just I can't even lift my arms. I'm so tired.
And you're so tired, and then someone comes to the door or something, right? And they're I need this, and you're
well, okay.
Okay, let's do this.
We have it in us. Okay, yes. we can do this. Okay.
So one side story with that, just because we're filming this right before Pioneer Day, right? Or this being released right before Pioneer Day. We just watched 17 Miracles again as a family.
Yeah, yeah.
And I love, there's several scenes in there where you see this. You see the men laying down their lives for the women and the children. And that's something that's in Christian culture, Christian civilization, you know, like open doors or things like that. And I think we've memorized rules, but we don't understand the principle. And the principle is this, that this is what priesthood is, that this is the strongest, give their life for those who need your help. And
we're going to get into that here in section 83. Just a couple of minutes.
So we cannot get ahead of ourselves. Sorry.
So yes, that's fine. That's a good actually kind of segue into that as well. Okay, so let's go ahead. Anything else on 81?
Nope.
Okay, let's go into 82.
Well, of course, there's. I mean,
sections
packed.
Right. But, yeah.
It's nothing else, right?
Okay, but none other things there. So section 82. I'm going to go ahead and pull that one up here.
Okay.
Just in case we need to reference to it. And in this particular one, there's a couple of verses that are relatively well known. I mean, I don't know if famous is the right word, but anyway.
Yeah, but kind of become those
quoted a lot. Okay.
Cliche phrases.
Exactly, and so one of those is in verse 3, and I wanted to just touch base with you. Just a little bit on that one. It says, "For of him unto whom much is given, much is required. And he who sins against the greater light shall receive the greater condemnation." Sure. And I'm reminded of when Christ was with the, talking about one of his teachings was that that if somebody is given this kind of light that it's better than a millstone be hung around his neck, then they sin against this greater light kind of thing. But I wanted to get into a little bit of a discussion about that because I feel so strongly about that. We have been blessed. I feel like I have been blessed beyond measure. I mean, it's just like unbelievable. I mean, I mean, we hit the jackpot lottery of the pre-existence. Really, I mean, we came down to this earth. We have the gospel in our lives. We're in the last days and the most exciting time in all of human history.
It's a little bit crazy, but there's definitely a lot of adventure.
Came down to good parents and with good families and the gospel is here. We've got temples all around us, and so in fact it's kind of interesting. Where I live here in Provo, we have 3 temples within 3 miles. From where my house is at. I'm right in the middle between the Provo City Center and the Provo Temple and the new Orem Temple as its superstructure is going up right now. It's pretty cool. But anyway, so wow, we could have been born, in an impoverished, in a nation where they don't even have clean running water or whatever, that kind of thing. I mean, we have so much to be grateful and thankful for. So many human beings have lived their lives without these blessings. So if that's the case, then we have a lot to do.
Yes.
We have a serious commission, if you will, to go out into the world and make it a better place and try to help our fellow members of humanity.
If you're sitting and not doing something when you get to the other side, you won't be very happy. No, this is something we actually grew up with, at least my siblings and I grew up with a lot because we would watch... so one of my dad's ways of teaching is through movies. And so we watched so many movies, like hundreds and hundreds and hundreds. He'd already sifted, we're not talking about Disney and dumb movies. We're talking about a lot of movies.
No, wait a minute. I like The Lion King. I mean, what's the matter with that?
What I mean is so there's so many good movies that are either biographical of great men and women in history that a lot of people don't know about because they're not on the top Hollywood billboards or whatever, but so many good movies. And that's one of the reasons we started ZionTube was because we were like, we got to just get a movie database so that other people don't have to reinvent the wheel. But we would watch movies.
I hope Santa Music's in there.
And so we'd watch movies and he'd pause it all the way through and we'd talk about it. Yeah. And one of the things is we watched movies about Mother Teresa, the Polish resistance under communism, Hungarian freedom fighters, and he'd pause it and be like, okay, there's people living like this. Or notice in this situation, Mother Teresa knows this, but she doesn't have this element of the gospel or whatever. But you do. And it's sitting in your lap. So you need to go and do something with it. You need to, when you every day, you should go to bed knowing I did everything I could to get the message of the gospel out, and sometimes that's through cleaning the kitchen and changing diapers. And sometimes that's through speaking and writing books, and sometimes it changes by the day. I know it does for me. So it's not so much this is about, oh, you have to be like a CEO or something. It means you get on your knees and you pray and you say, God, what am I supposed to do? But you need to be doing something. Yeah. All good fruit. Every good person bears good fruit. So if you're not bearing fruit and you're not producing, then it's just time for a self-evaluation.
Or as the parable of the trees, you know, the olive trees, yes. You know, you're good to be cast out,
hewn down,
hewn down and cast down. Okay, no, so the receive the greater condemnation though, just as a final little thing there. So what I think what he's saying here is that if someone doesn't have the opportunity, for example, to have the gospel, they're going to get a little bit more on the mercy side,
yes,
maybe, than those who have had the gospel and have that knowledge and so forth, and then sin against it.
Yes,
it's one thing to sin by omission, you know, because you didn't know about it. Yes. It's another thing to sin by commission, meaning that you know about it, but you willfully are choosing to not follow God.
Right.
And when that happens, then it's definitely a greater condemnation.
Definitely. And I think with that, people say, okay, well, in that case, I don't want to know. Like, don't tell me, you know, and so so later on, then he goes and he's like, okay, let me explain to you what commandments are. He's like, I'm going to give you a commandment. This is my will. So when God gives us commandments, because sometimes people shirk, they're like, I'm going to be condemned. I'm going to be held accountable for this. Well, one of the things, just quickly, I remember my dad telling us this when we were little, and I was like, I never thought about it that way. Then he was like, you're accountable for everything that's in these scriptures, whether you read them or not, because you had access to them. You know, they were sitting on the shelf. So if you're, you know, kind of like
gathering dust,
they're sitting over there, but I don't really want to know what I'm supposed to be doing.
I don't want to have to be held to that other standard.
Right. So I think I'm going to go do something else. Then the Lord's going to say, well, I gave it to you just because you put in your earplugs and tried to drone it out. So I think when we think that way, I know that changed it for me. I'm trying to remember how old I even was. 11 or 12, maybe 13. And I was like, wait, if I'm going to be judged by this and I'm held accountable, then I think I better figure out what it is. And that kind of spurred me to start digging into the scriptures a little deeper.
Yeah, well, I think that some of us may be a little bit reluctant to accept the idea that, you know, being a king and a priest or a queen and a priestess or whatever, that as we're talked about in the temple, that's, you know, that's a lot of responsibility.
Yes.
You know, I mean, if you know, when somebody is brought up to be a king or whatever, I mean, they're treated differently and they look at life differently because they realize that, okay, my people are going to be basically holding me responsible and accountable for their, you know, futures as well. Yes. So that, I think that's a really important thing that I think ties into what we were talking about at the beginning, knowing who you are.
Yes.
Would you live your life differently if you thought you were apes and slime?
Yes.
And that was your heritage, and that was, and that ultimately there is no life afterwards. I mean, would that be different than if you were brought up and raised up to know that you are a ruler or a king or whatever, or a servant, you know, that you have a special mission or something like that, you know, in life to help and bless other people.
Yes. Yes.
And I think that's absolutely, that makes a big difference.
Yes. I know it's a story it's an anecdote that doesn't have historical basis as far as we can tell, but there's this story that's been told so many times in conference, and I like the story because what it illustrates. So fictional, but I was born to be a king. Do you know that story? That's told that there's the son of the prince who is kidnapped, and the enemy takes him, and instead of killing him, they say, well, he's going to be better use to us if we demoralize him. If we can destroy his character and get him to compromise his virtue and his standards, then we can send him back to his own country and he's worthless. He no longer has that integrity. And so they try everything. They bring every kind of tempting food to make him a slave to, you know, appetite and food. They bring women, they bring entertainment, they bring everything they can, and he will not bend. And they come to him finally and they're like,
Why?
How can you, how? Like everyone else is.
What gives you that strength?
Right. And he said, I cannot do what you ask because I was born to be a king. And I think that story is so powerful because I think literally that needs to be every single one of us. We need to think that way every day of our life. I cannot compromise because I was born to be different. And I was born to be
like our Father in heaven is.
I was born to be a king and a queen in Israel and lay down my life for my people, just like Esther. Like, how is this any different than Esther or Joseph of Egypt? And one last thing, Rod, because I know, but...
What do you know?
So the I know that I talk a lot, but there's a French motto that is like one of my favorite mottos in the whole world. It's noblesse oblige. And I'm probably just...
Say it again, one more time.
Noblesse oblige. So I'm sure I just butchered the pronunciation. I'm sorry to anyone watching it. But the concept the concept behind the phrase means that those of royalty or those who have a higher station have a responsibility to take care of those of the lower class. So it's the idea of if you're a knight or if you're a king or a queen or a dutch or a duchess or if you're someone with power and influence, it's your responsibility to go down to the lower classes and take care of them. And there's a book called The Lord Fauntleroy. It's on YouTube. There's a really good movie. It's like 3 hours adaptation that I would encourage everyone to watch. And that's the theme of that story. It's a fictional novel. Again? Little Lord Fauntleroy. It's by the same lady who wrote The Secret Garden and A Little Princess.
Okay.
But the whole message of the movie is this concept. If you're a lord and you're given power and influence, it's your responsibility to lift up everyone beneath you. That's your responsibility.
Yeah. All right. So I think we've
probably covered that one.
Covered that one. Well, I mean, there's so much more that could be done, obviously, but we need to move on. So, is there anything else that you wanted to do before I go to verse 10?
Nope.
Okay. So, verse 10 is the next one that is pretty much everybody can probably quote this one. It says, "I, the Lord, am bound when you do what I say. But when ye do not what I say, ye have no promise." And wow, what an amazing thing. So let's just kind of jump into that for just a second because I love that particular one.
Yes.
Do you have any particular thing you'd like to start off with here?
Well, I like that he's bound.
Okay, so being bound means that you are tethered. I mean, you are connected, if you will.
So something that's really important is that God created the laws of our universe. And yes, he did learn those laws from his father, but it's kind of like, if you think of it, you grew up in a house and there's rules in that house. But when you go and you create your own home, you establish newly what rules are you going to apply in your home, right? And every home is different. And I think that's actually an illustration of kind of what the kingdoms are like. Every person's gonna... And so God created these laws of this universe, and there are laws. So you have to ask, why did he put the laws in place that he did? It's not like he's a victim to the universe too. It's not like just they automatically exist and he has to follow them. So he's a victim just like the rest of us to have to follow these commandments. Otherwise we're miserable and damned, you know? So it's he put these laws in place and he created them. And what he says in the section, the surrounding of verse 10 is he's like, these are gifts. This is my will to make you happy. These are directions, right? How many people are going to try to go to a big city and they've never been there before and they're going to try to live there for a week and go to all these locations without a GPS or directions or anything, right?
Well, people have been doing it for centuries, but
without the
GPS. But it's a whole lot easier with GPS, that's for sure.
It's going to be pretty difficult. If you start trying to go to LA or you start you're not going to get much done besides going around, where am I? And so he says, these are directions. He's saying, this is what's going to make you happy. And I think we have to really ask ourselves, do we really believe that God is the happiest person in the universe? Because I don't think most of the time we actually do. Because he says
he gets mad occasionally.
But you know what I mean, Rod.
I know. Yes.
He, are we happier or is he happier? If we genuinely believe he's the happiest, then we're going to say, well, why? Because he's happy because of his lifestyle. So why do we?
And also, he's happy when his kids do what they're supposed to be doing, that kind of thing too.
Yes.
Yes.
But because that's how he lives, so he puts these laws in place, and he says, "This is how you. If you live this way, you're going to be happy." And
yeah, I'm just wondering about that. If there are, because I mean, how can somebody who is all powerful and omniscient and so forth, how can he be bound by anything? I mean, isn't he free to do anything he wants to do, kind of thing? And I think that there are immutable laws that were set up in the Council of the Gods, if you want to call that, and that our Heavenly Father and Christ, His Son, are also to some extent subject to those laws, and they work within because they understand these laws. I mean, I'm talking about natural laws, like things like laws of gravity and laws and laws of thermodynamics and all kinds of other of these physical kind of laws, and there's obviously spiritual laws that coincide with all the physical ones as well.
Well, it's kind of like a stove, right? Like you can say, like okay, so like if a father's with a child and he says, "Don't touch the stove." Yeah. Like the child can break that law. And welcome to do it
and learn.
But there's going to be a consequence. That hand's going to get burned, even if the father doesn't tell the child, right? Yeah. So sometimes, back to that thing of people saying, "Well, I just don't want to know." Like maybe if I don't know, I won't be held accountable. Well, you'll still bear some of those consequences, because if you go hit that stove, whether or not someone told you, you're going to get burned. I think
if you've had the opportunity. I mean, some people never have the opportunity, for example, to hear the gospel. They're not going to be held to that standard that, But
they still bear a lot of the scars. Like, I know people, and they went through so much hell because no one taught them growing up how to live. And so that's another reason why we need to be helping people to be able to be spared from those consequences. But again, if you hit the stove and your father told you not to do it, or your mom told you not to do it, there's a double whammy on consequences right there. Because you not only burnt your hand, but you also disobeyed. And so just when you're talking about like, okay, can God, well, of course, God has agency. It's not like he's a robot.
In fact, it sounds like that there are laws basically that are set up that if we do our part, that he can't escape the consequences of that law. In other words, he's bound by that law, just like we're bound to our, to the laws of our country and that kind of stuff to some extent. Right?
And I think he wants to, because his nature has been changed, where it's kind of like when someone's repented. Someone was asking me the other day, how do you know if you've really repented from pornography, like really put it behind you? And I was talking to them about, well, you hate it. Once you've truly changed from a sin, it's disgusting. You don't want to do it. Yeah. There's no temptation anymore because you've been. And so I think we need to understand that about God's character too. He has a character that he hates sin, and he loves light and goodness and beauty and holiness and all of these things. And we can get to the point where we can be like that too, which would make life a whole lot easier.
It makes a whole lot difference for how women are viewed and so forth in society and that kind of stuff. Yeah. I'll never forget. Well, trying to forget. Over in Italy, when I started my mission in Italy, I mean, they had these little, on every corner of the big cities, they had these little, like, newspaper stands, but they would have the covers of like, porn magazines and that kind of stuff. Yeah. All pasted up in big posters on the sides and so forth, and you really couldn't even get away from it. And after a while, I started to realize, gosh, are there any girls who haven't, done this? I mean, is there anybody left that has some virtue? I mean,
yes.
And then I realized that's no. There are a few, okay, but they're far and few in between. But but back to this.
Can I say one short thought just on that, because I think that is the environment in our culture, is crying out that there's nobody left that has had integrity. I was listening to one podcast, and the person on there, they said, I don't believe there's a single man who's ever not looked at pornography. And I know at least two. So my father's one of them, and then I have a friend too that has never touched it in his life. Never.
Yeah.
I'm not saying there's not more than two. Just those are two who have told me that personally, and I've seen that in their life. And I've thought, why don't more people speak? There has to be more, Like at first I was always like, well, maybe it's only one person. Then I'm like, oh, there's two, and then I believe there's some others. I just haven't asked them directly, but and I think that's one of the reasons we need more people to speak up and be proud of being good. Like people sometimes say, well, I don't want to tell people because then it sounds like I'm putting myself forward. But we need some hope in this world. We need some people.
Well, examples too.
Yeah,
Good
some
examples.
girls that say, you know what? No, I've never touched, or I'm not that kind of person at all. And we need young men to say, nope, haven't touched it, and I'm not going to, so that those that are struggling can say, okay, we can do this. We can heal this.
If they can do it, we can do it.
We're not all stuck in this pit together. So it's just, that's just a shout out just to encourage people to speak up more and be proud of being good. Just be proud of being good and share that light. Don't put the candle under a bushel. Put it on a candlestick.
I remember growing up. I mean, in fact, this is one of my mom's favorite weapons.
Oh dear.
To keep me going on the right path. I mean, whenever I have a big decision in my life, and I've talked about this in a couple of the other podcasts when I talked about, just some of the different hard decisions and things like that in life. And my mom would say, you know what, Rod? She said, if you do what the Lord wants you to do, then you'll be blessed. If you don't, then you have no promise, right? That was the scripture that she would use to basically, and I'd go, oh, Mom, I hate when you do that. And she insisted on it, kind of thing, and just said, you know what, just if you want the Lord's blessings in your life, then you'll do what the Lord wants you to do. Yeah. And then you'll receive the blessings. Yeah. And he can't get out of it. Yeah. That's kind of the point that I wanted to make, that she would kind of hammer with me. If you pay your tithing, he is bound, as far as the laws that are associated with tithing. Yes. If you live the law of chastity, you're going to be, then the Lord is bound with certain things, right? Yes. So any of these laws of God, basically, if you will live them, then he says, I can't get out of giving you the blessings associated with it. And he doesn't want to try. He's not trying to get out of it. Okay? He wants to give us those blessings. Yes. But he can't do it if we're not going to do our part. But he's telling us, if you do your part, it's 100% guaranteed. Yes. Right? Yes. So
I think, when you read the scriptures over and over, he's like, I will bless you. I will bless you. And I remember, I think I was about 14, and I remember just...
Like 2 years ago. Well,
not quite.
Teasing.
Yes,
okay.
2 years. No, just...
Okay, go ahead. Yeah.
But I remember sitting, and I was thinking about... I was actually thinking about the dating culture, but this applies to everything. But I remember thinking in my mind, I was like, I just felt so strongly an impression, like the Lord doesn't want heartbreak in our lives. Like, I think we get ourselves into a rut of like, this life is just meant to be miserable, and we're just meant to be, it's just meant to be hell. Mm-hmm. And it is hard. I mean, Joseph Smith's life was not fun. The Lord's life was not fun. There are afflictions, but the Lord doesn't want it to be that way. He doesn't want us to live in a world. Can
I make a little clarification on that too?
Yes.
Okay, because true. I mean, the Lord doesn't sit there and go, "Gosh, they need some more trials." Okay.
Yeah.
And when the trials come, He wants us to have joy and be happy.
Yes.
But I think but part of this life is about learning how to be happy while you're going through the trials.
Yes.
To continue to thank God even when you're facing major issues and problems in your life.
For sure.
Because none of us are going to be refined as much as we need to be, and be able to be willing to submit ourselves to His will.
Yes.
Unless we've gone through some things that test it.
Yeah. That's why He put us on this earth He said He put the worst people here and the best people here. So it's like oil and water, just, But, So but thanks for clarifying that, because what I was trying to...
I know you know that. I just was...
Yes. So where I was trying to go is just this idea of He doesn't want the earth us to be sick. So He gives us laws to say, if you eat a certain way and you live a certain way, you won't be sick, And the problem is we're all the rain and the sun shines on the righteous as well as the wicked, and we're all bearing consequences, not just from our decisions but other people's decisions. So I understand all that, but where I was going is the Lord wants us to have strong families. He's not just like, well, just youth are gonna struggle and that's just how life. No, he's like, if you follow my laws, I can have a strong family, or I can have a world where people live for hundreds of years like they did at the beginning of the earth and they were healthy. We can live in a world where the earth waters itself. Like, there's ways to, and that's why he's giving commandments. It's not because he's like, well, this is what I think, and you have to do my way. He's like, this is how I want you to be happy. And if you live this way, then Zion is going to increase in beauty and holiness and put on beautiful garments. I mean, the Lord has a vision of victory. The Lord's vision is not just endure. The Lord's vision is, let's overcome this and let's build something better, because that's the purpose of life is joy. Men are that they might have joy. Men are not so that they can get a bigger paycheck or suffer or die or men are so that they can have joy, and he's giving us laws so that we can have joy. And this sounds like such a duh statement, but do we really believe this? If we believe it, we're going to change our life.
I mean, bottom line, God gave us all these heavy commandments, right? I mean, thou shalt not, right? That sounds pretty restrictive, right?
It depends on if you want joy or not.
That's just it. See, it's basically, it's not the people go, well, wait a minute, but living this way, it takes away from my freedom, my choices and so forth. Yeah. Yes, because these commandments were specifically designed for us to have joy. Yes. How is it that having a restriction gives us more joy? Yeah. And I liken that to there's two quick stories. Number one is that I love this. There was a stagecoach company back in the days, when they were stagecoaches. Anyway, we can maybe put this on a freeway, but no. But it only works with stagecoaches. But this particular route, they were looking for a driver, stagecoach driver, and they were looking for the best driver because this particular route goes up through the mountains, and it was pretty scary, some cliffs on the sides and so forth. And so when they were interviewing, they had a couple of different people they were interviewing for the position of stagecoach driver. Yeah. And the interviewer said, okay, so this has a lot of cliffs and so forth. So how closely can you get to the edge without going over? Yeah. And the one guy says, you know what, I can. Well, there's like three guys. One guy says, I can drive within like 10 feet of the edge and be safe. I think I've heard this story. Be safe. And the guy says, okay. So you got the second guy comes up and he says, how close can you drive to the edge? Well, he heard the other guy say 10 feet. So I said, well, you know what? I could drive that stagecoach within 5 feet of the edge and not go over. I said, okay. And so I got the third guy up there. He says, how close can you get to the edge and not go over? And he says, I would stay away as far away from the edge as I could possibly do. Now, who do you think got the job? Right?
I know who I'd hire.
Right. So the person who stays away from the edge. Yeah. But also nowadays to kind of stop that from happening, this is the second part of the story. We have highways, and we're a little more advanced than just having that, just an edge that the stagecoach could go over. So they put guardrails up. Mm-hmm. Are those guardrails restrictive? Mm-hmm. Do they keep us from going wherever we want to go? Yeah. Well, yeah, they do. They keep you from falling off the cliff. Okay.
But some people want to go.
That's what the commandments are about. They're basically designed to keep you from falling off the cliff, because it may seem like it's nice and fun to go take a flying leap off of a cliff in the car, but it's that awful sudden stop at the bottom that is so difficult. The flying through the air part, that's actually kind of fun. Okay. But anyway,
right. I think what you're hitting at that's important is like people are thinking like, okay, why are we here? I remember I was in a Relief Society and they were like asking like, why are we here? And people were literally like, just honestly like, I don't know. We're here to get a body. Yeah. We're here to have trials. Just like, wow, that sounds like just really like this loving God is like, I'm gonna send you down to get this body.
So glad I'm here.
I know. Right. But if you think about it this way, okay, so God lives, he's alive. He's not just sitting on a cloud with a harp. He has a certain sense of fashion. He has interests. He has
all
a
those
sense
harp
of humor.
lessons I've taken, and it's going to be all for naught.
Yes.
Just kidding.
That's right. So you got God up there. He's interested in science. He's a scientist.
He's the ultimate scientist.
Fascinated by science. He loves doing things and creating things. He's a sculptor. He's an artist. He loves movies. He loves whatever kind of movies they have up there. You know, he loves to create. He loves to write and direct and act.
They have more movies up there than Plex.
He sings, right? And so God is a person who lives. He has a home with buildings and flowers and gardens and like I think sometimes we get into this idea, I don't know where it comes from, but like God's up there just like sitting on a cloud and it's like floating and you're like, wow, could anyone have a more boring existence? Or like, you know, and he's just sitting up there like striking people or blessing people, right? No, like he's up there living with a family, with wives and children, and you know, he has people he loves that he loves to get together with and feast with. Like he's alive, right? So he has a way of living, moving, talking that is calculated for maximum joy. And he says, if you want to, I can share with you what that means so that you can be like that. And some people are going to say, I want most of it except for a few things. And so he's going to put them in a kingdom where they want that. Other people are like, you know what? I don't like any of this consecration idea, or that just does not sound fun. But I do love serving people and everything else. Okay, great. Let's put you in the terrestrial kingdom where you're just and honorable, da-da-da-da-da. And other people are like, are you kidding me? Scrap all of it. I want to live for myself. And he's like, okay, are you willing to keep these laws? Or are you willing to keep some traffic laws and maybe not like completely torture people?
I hope there's not traffic in heaven.
Like, you know what I'm saying though? Like a few like restrictions.
How could that be heaven if there was traffic? I mean, come on.
Rod's gonna analyze every word. But you know, like, and so he puts them in the telestial kingdom. And so the idea is, it's not like people have this idea like, am I gonna make it or not?
Yeah.
That's not what it's about. It's about, what are you willing to live? And how much of God's lifestyle do you want to be like?
What are you comfortable with?
Yep.
I think to a large extent, the judgment is going to be, I mean, obviously Christ is ultimately the judge.
Yeah.
I should say God is the judge. And so
he
forth.
gives us what we want.
But I think that a lot of us will choose what we're comfortable with.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and I had the experience when I was way back when I was a young man, and my brother just got back from his mission. We had a stake president who was just an amazing individual, so close to the gospel and so forth, and so close to the Lord. And when he got back from his mission, he came back to have his his release, give him his mission release, and so they had a prayer, and I felt literally, I mean, I was at a point in my life, I wasn't doing anything really bad necessarily, but I just wasn't being real good either. I was kind of in my little bit rebellious stage there. Anyway, and I was not at all comfortable in the same room with this man when he was praying to the Lord, because he was like talking to him. Mm-hmm. And I was just like, oh my gosh, and I wanted to like, okay, I want to get out of here. It's
good. You have a conscience.
Yeah.
It's actually very rare in our role. So
I realized at that point, I don't ever want to be in that position again where I don't feel comfortable with people who are people of God.
Yeah. If someone's better, we need to not be uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Otherwise.
Okay, we got to wrap up here in a few things. So, so any other? Let's see. I was going to talk a little bit about verse 14. Okay. For Zion must increase in beauty and in holiness. Her borders must be enlarged. Her stakes must be strengthened. Yea, verily I say unto you, Zion must arise and put on her beautiful garments. Mm-hmm. I love that so much. Yeah. I mean, it's just, talking about the just how when you follow God's plan, it's so beautiful. Everything just works together. Everything synchronizes perfectly. Mm-hmm. And there's just a beauty and a holiness that is that you talk about.
Yes.
So
I remember when my so I had a brother that passed away when I was 10, and that kind of shifted everything in our family, because I mean, not everything, like the foundation was there, but
your family.
And it just made us rethink, like, okay, where are we going? What are we accomplishing when we die? What legacy are we leaving behind? And I remember it was shortly after that we had a friend come over, I think he was about 12. And he was more of a wild...
A wild card?
He was the wildest kid in the ward. So he comes over.
And he's how old? This is 10 years old? 10 or 12?
I was 10 and he was, I think, 12 or 13.
Okay.
Somewhere around there, give or take. But he came over to our house and we didn't think much of it. You know, we're friends with their whole family. So Then he goes home and the dad called my dad later and said, "You're not going to believe what this boy did. He came home. I don't know what happened to him, but he threw all of his video games away and took down, he had all these rock music posters up on, like, just took them all his movie stuff, just all his posters, just took them down and threw them away." And he said, like, what prompted that? And he said, "I was over at their house," and he said, "That feeling that's at the Stoddard's house, I want to have that all of the time." You know, and that was not because, like, of us. I mean, we were just trying as a family to live good, and God blessed that feeling of beauty and holiness.
Not bring in this worldly influences and
and there was just a peace there, and it was so affecting for this young boy that he went home and he threw everything away because he was like, "I'm willing to throw everything away to get a piece of that." And so that is the power of being Zion. That is the power of shining that light out, where that is beauty. It's holiness, and we need to feel that every day in our lives.
I think Alma the Younger's experience. He says, "I'm willing to give away all my sins." Yes,
King Lamone's father. That's like my favorite Book of Mormon verse. Thank you, Rod.
Yeah. I will give away all my sins to know God.
Yeah.
And seems kind of interesting that terminology, give away my sins. You know, it's like here, you have them. You know,
he doesn't want them.
He doesn't want them. Yes. He's going to bury him out there somewhere, anyways. But in larger stakes, I think that if we as a people, can increase in our virtue and our beauty and our holiness, then the church will not languish. Yes. And I mean, I think I look at some of these early people, the early brethren and so forth. I mean, they were giving up everything. They would give up. Some of them had just been newly married. Their wives were just having like a couple of little kids, and they're like being called to go on missions for a couple of years.
Yeah.
You know?
No, it was hard.
These were difficult. I mean, the Lions Camp, they thought they were going to war. Yeah. You know, that kind of thing to some extent. Yes. So are we willing to make the same kinds of sacrifices? Yeah. You know, when somebody says, maybe having just one earring would be sufficient. Is it a big sacrifice to do that? Mm-hmm. To just follow? I mean, these are simple little laws, but if you can't follow the little simple ones, then how is the Lord supposed to trust you to follow the big ones? Yeah. So there we go. So
the greatest people in history literally spent lives where every day they sacrificed what they wanted to do to help other people. And I think, that every great person I know lives that way. Every mediocre person I know lives for themselves. You know? Yeah. But there are people that are so good, and the more we can do that, light increases and increases. And that is how Satan will eventually be bound during the millennium, is through people making those decisions.
All right. Anything else you wanted to talk about in that particular section here? Okay, let's go to 83. The only thing I was going to mention is in verse 22 here, and still in section 82. It says, "And now verily I say unto you, and this is wisdom, make unto yourselves friends with the mammon of unrighteousness, and they will not destroy you." Now that is an interesting thing.
Wise as serpents and harmless as doves.
Yes, and in fact, it kind of reminds me of there's a Chinese, not a proverb, but it was a Chinese leader actually that basically said, keep your friends close and your enemies closer. Because the best way you can know how to deal with an enemy is by studying them. So military strategists will tell you that if you don't study and your enemies, then they will have an advantage over you. So that's not to say that you're studying them so that you can keep them. But what do you think he's saying here? To make friends with mammon of unrighteousness, and they will not destroy you.
You know, I think so. In Rough Stone Rolling, Richard Bushman really tears on Joseph Smith, being like, he was so deceived all the time, and he was just had no discernment of character and stuff. Mm-hmm. And when you study Joseph Smith's life, he was actually brilliantly inspired. And 9 times out of 10, he knew what
people were.
They were thinking,
what their
and they were
motives.
intending. He knew John C. Bennett. He knew Sidney Rigdon. He's like, get rid of this guy, but he was wise and inspired. And so I think, just because we don't have a whole lot of time, I would just say study Joseph Smith's life, how he dealt with all the tricky situations, betrayal, friends, enemies.
And he had a lot of people that he let into his inner circle that were close, that they had bad motives.
Most of them.
I mean, like this Jesse Goss, in Section 81. I mean,
most of the people that were in Joseph Smith's inner circle ended up turning. All the 3 witnesses, 10 of the 12 apostles in Kirtland, so Jesus Christ had Judas Iscariot. So
and Christ hung out with the tax collectors and these other people. The fishermen. They weren't some of the high society people.
And I love what Joseph Smith said that in the Relief Society minutes. He said the reason why the Lord hung out with the prostitutes and the tax collectors is because they wanted to repent, and so he sat down with them to help them repent. Yeah. That's why when it came to the Pharisees, he was like, "Get out of my side."
But on the other hand, that is true. But who did he go to first? And when he first realized who he was, when they went to pay their taxes, and then he left, and they found him. Where did they find him? He wasn't with the fishermen. He was with the ecclesiastical leaders, and kind of confounding them. And how does this kid know these doctrines, these deeper doctrines? How does this, I don't know how old he was, maybe.
Are you talking about when he was 12, when he was in the temple teaching the doctors? Yeah.
So that's the first people he went to, actually, was the doctors and that kind of stuff, right?
Yes.
So he and I think he was actually quite friendly to some of the Sanhedrin people.
Yes.
You look at Joseph of Arimathea. Was willing to give him his tomb and so forth. Well, he had a relationship there, and that was kind of a familial relationship. Yes. But nevertheless, or
like Nicodemus, just people that wanted to.
So he didn't have an adversarial relationship necessarily with them. Mm-hmm. They had an adversarial relationship with him.
Exactly.
And that's where the kind of the difference is. So what I think what he's saying here is, don't be an adversary to even your enemies. Right. Don't make them your enemy. Mm-hmm. That is Satan's plan to make everybody enemies and divide everybody and so forth. So
bring contention, right? That's
and he says if you don't make friends with some of these people who may look at you as an enemy, then they could destroy you. And I found that in my situation with the whole Book of Mormon information, and that could, there's those who attack me pretty mercifully, but you won't find attack
mercilessly.
Mercifully. Yeah, mercifully they attack me.
I'm just laughing because I know the backstory.
Yeah, so that.
Rod and I are laughing.
But basically, I didn't respond back in kind, or at least I tried not to. You don't find on our websites all these, all the reasons why, the Book of Mormon couldn't have happened in Central America, even though I could write dozens of articles about that. But we're not enemies. In fact, we're on the same team. I've said this many different times. The people who have different ideas about geography, whether it's Central America or the Baja Peninsula or Malaysia or whatever it might be. We're all still members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and we need to act like that.
The reason why we're
not
doing
attack
this
each other, especially high priests, slugging it out online. That's always really fun, right? And of course Satan just loves that. Yeah. So we need to be. The reason why we're doing this work is to help people. Yes. And that's I'm just gonna throw in a plug. Everyone should go watch the movie Tortured for Christ. The story of Richard Wurmbrand. I read the book. And his wife's autobiography too. But the movie's well done. But he was tortured for 14 years in communist Romania. And the entire time, his message is how he loved the communists. He said, I hate communism. He said, it is Satan's weapon that turns people into animals. But he would, while they were torturing him, he would be praying for the torturers. Well, just like Christ did on the cross. Yes. Anyways, that's just a phenomenal. They know not what they do. Yeah.
Phenomenal book. And the movie is on YouTube for free. So,
right.
And it's very high budget.
All right, we're past time now, so we've got just a couple of minutes here for section 83, which is essentially about.
Yes.
We kind of alluded that in the beginning of the podcast here.
Yeah.
Men, time to step it up.
And then you say your spiel, and then I have a spiel, and it's about women stepping up.
Okay, there we go. All right.
To this.
Okay, so this is for section 83. Let's go to that real quickly here. And so section 83 here.
This is kind of what we were talking about earlier, this concept of this. It's the responsibility of those who are strong to protect the weak. So, whether that's a father taking care of his family, or if the father's gone, it's the mother's stronger than the children. So the mother, if there's a threat, the mom steps out to defend the kids. If the dad's there, he steps out, Yeah. So it's this idea of the strong protect the weak.
Yeah.
Instead of survival of the fittest.
But we have to be strong to be doing any protecting at all, right? Okay. So women have claim on their husbands for their maintenance until their husbands are taken. Mm-hmm. That's kind of a bad assumption there. And if they are not found transgressors, they shall have fellowship in the church. And if they are not faithful, they shall not have fellowship in the church. Yet they may remain upon their inheritances according to the laws of the land. So this is kind of the higher law of the church here and the laws of the land. All children have claim upon their parents for their maintenance until they are of age. Doesn't tell us what the age is, but until they are able to take care or be on their own. And after that, they have claim upon the church. Now, I think this is really interesting. So there's parents, kind of a hierarchy here. So the first thing is that the women and children have claim upon the husband and their father. Yep. Okay, and then it's the women and the children and so forth. But if the father's taken out, basically, then they have claim on the government.
No.
Oh, that's not what it's. Oh my goodness. Okay, yeah. Oh no, it's not claim on the government. It's claim on the church.
And even before that, it says if their parents can't help them out.
Right.
So
right.
It's
If their
family
parents have not.
first, and then you start going out like that.
So that's how society
was really good on this. There's some talks by Boyd K. Packer.
Yeah, and there's some issues with society where we have this tendency when things get hard. Who do we look for help?
Government will save
the government. The first thing we should look for is from family.
Yeah.
Is our family willing to step up and help us? Okay. If they can't or won't, then you go to the church. And if the church can't or won't, or then you go to the government. Just think how much money the government would save every year if people would just follow this simple rule.
People would suddenly become self-reliant.
And all of a sudden, the taxes would have to go way down and so forth. I mean, if people became actually responsible for their own welfare.
Yes.
And that means also that people can't be, idlers and eat the food of the worker bees.
Yeah. Can I jump right? Because that's a perfect segue. No, yes. You go ahead and finish your thought, and then that's going to be a segue.
That was pretty much what I was going to say. Go ahead.
Just like when I was thinking about this verse, is that is critical. It says women have claim, right? So it is the husband's
claim by what?
Duty
by marriage.
Right. Yes, upon their husbands. Right.
This is another nice thing about in our society where we basically don't marry anymore, right? I mean, we have women have no claim. You don't have any claim on me. I mean, we maybe even had a couple of kids together, but
yes.
I'm scot-free.
Yes. And so we've lost this principle that God is saying it is the duty of the husband to take care of his wife and his children, to provide for him. Women have claim. That means they can go to him and say, by God's decree, you have a responsibility here, right? It's not just cultural or that's just what we do in our culture, but over in Timbuktu, they have something else. I don't know, right? But with that, okay, so like you said, you call for the men to step up. This is one thing I think that is important with that. We always throw out in our culture, yes, the husband is to provide, but what we saw in the probably the early 1900s to the mid 1900s is a tendency for some women, not going to overgeneralize here, but some women to say, okay, well then, if it's the dad's job to bring home the paycheck, it's my job and the kids' job to spend it. and wash soaps all day, right? This is a problem in American culture, and I'm going to call it out as a woman. So, because it drives me crazy.
Okay.
In a good way. But it's this attitude of, well, the dad's going to bring home the paycheck, and so it's the kid's like, I'm a 16-year-old and I want the best phone, I want brand clothes, I want whatever.
Nice car.
And the mom's like, well, it's my job to browse Facebook and go to the salon and hang out with my girls, and the dad will pay for it. And if the dad's not paying for it, and then like, why aren't you giving me a better house, and where's my boat, and that kind of a thing. So if you look in the scriptures, what do we see in the scriptures? Well, if we see in the scriptures, let's start with Adam and Eve. That's pretty basic, right? You have Adam was cast out of the garden with Eve, right? And the Lord says, thorns and weeds and everything else is all fun. It's going to start growing. And Adam, you're going to go out there and grow while Eve sits in the tent. No, it says Adam labored and Eve labored with him. Yeah. They were working together. And if you look in scriptures, like you said, it's all about not having idlers. Everyone needs to be contributing. So just as a little historical, I think we've moved so far now that we're in the 21st century, we've lost our culture. So let me just step back a little bit. Like in the 1800s...
Especially our work ethic. Holy cow.
Yes. We've lost work ethic, and we've lost the idea of what some call the family economy. So in Israelite cultures, or the early 16...
And farming cultures.
Yeah. The Pilgrim, the Puritans... the economy was family-based. And you can kind of see this in some of even the movies or stuff, right? You have the family that maybe owns a store, and they run the store in the basement, they live in the top floor, and the whole family works in the store. The blacksmiths.
Kind of like Newell K. Knight.
Right.
Or no, not, yeah.
Newell K. Whitney,
Whitney,
yeah.
Yes.
You have, if the blacksmith shop, it's just right there. They have the fields, the head of the Smith family, right? It was Lucy Mack Smith and Joseph Smith Sr., and the whole family worked to clear that land, to build the barns. They worked together.
To tap the trees.
Right.
To make the maple syrup, which was about half of their total income. And they worked their tails off for about a week and a half there. Yeah. While the maple sugar was flowing and so forth.
Yes.
Yeah,
I did a vidcast called Rough Stone Rolling Debunked, where I went through like a lot of the data on how much work they accomplished. They were like workaholics. In a good way, I think. But that was the idea. It was families worked together and it was family, instead of businesses running the economy, it was family businesses ran the economy, and all of the family worked together, which was so good, because then you had a mother raising the toddlers and doing her part, and she wasn't out there in 100 degrees like the men were. So there is differences. Men and women are different. I'm not trying to,
What?
But sorry.
That's a revelation
Newsflash.
to some people. Yes. Okay, there we go. Newsflash.
Yeah. And the men are going to do the harder work because they're, again, trying to protect the
well, yeah. And it's so funny. Just a little quick comment here, and that is that in our society today, we have gone so far off of the cliff of this whole "there's no difference between the sexes" thing.
Yes, that's what I heard. That's what you heard at BYU.
They're saying, oh, there's no difference between men and women and so forth. But then when men decide that they want to fake like they're women and compete in women's sports, wow, it's amazing how they sort of dominate that. Yeah. Well, God made us different.
Yes.
We have different kinds of hormones and different kinds of muscle structure, and we're supposed to be the hunter gatherers and so forth, and the women, are the childbearing and the loving kind. It's kind of like good cop, bad cop. They need to
work together. So even like in business,
we work together. It works great.
Yeah.
Yes.
When you have a family economy, if you have both the woman's strengths and the man's strengths, like people are all this big thing of, well, like who makes the decisions? Well, you need both to come together. You need the heart and the mind together to get good revelation, right? So that's how
the spiritual and the physical together too.
Right.
Women tend to be, I think, a lot more on the spiritual side.
Well, I'd say it's different.
More on the physical, just like
I think it's different aspects of spiritual, right?
Yeah.
More of the speaking to the mind, that inspiration, those ideas, and then you got more emotion and.
Yeah. When men are faced with real difficulties back in the day, I mean, basically it was fight or flight. So we're kind of set up to fight.
And unfortunately,
and
that's how it was.
And with women, they kind of like negotiate their way out of the situation. Men are like pop them right in the face. Okay. But anyway.
Yes.
Not anymore, though. That's now no longer part of our culture.
Now we have, like, everyone's feminized. Anyway, so not to get, that's a whole nother discussion. So,
yes. We got to finish up here. Okay,
yeah.
go ahead.
So they had these family economies, and that's how it was based, right? So all the family worked together. So what happened was, then this is very high level, but it's critical because this is where a lot of the women are struggling with the whole feminism issue. And they're like, I see problems in the world, but what's the answer? Because we've set up false stereotypes of what the traditional family is, and then we've got feminism on the other hand, and people feel like they have to pick between these two extremes. And I'm saying there's a different answer if you just look in the scripture. So you had this family economy in the early 1800s. Then what happened is you had the Industrial Revolution come around and all these new things, and basically what ended up happening is, Satan's so smart, so he's like,
takes the men out of the family.
Let's take the economy out of the home, and we'll set up these corporations, and then we'll take the men out of the home, so they start working 9-to-5 jobs separate. Okay, so then we'll leave the mom and the kids sitting at home, and then the dad goes to work, and then everyone moves.
We'll entice him by giving the man enough money that he can actually have, that one man can make enough money to support an entire family.
Right.
But then once we get him hooked on that, then we'll kind of start taking that away and say, well, that's not enough. The wife has to go, and she has to work in a different job in a different place over here.
So you can see where this is going.
And we need to put the kids into public school systems.
So that's what happened. So they pull the man out of the home, and so then he's off doing his thing.
We're so old school, it's ridiculous. And she's not even old enough to be old school.
so then they're like, well, we're not only going to have this nice new economy. We'll have free schools and totally take care of everything. So no more is it the dad and the mom trying to work together to educate the children or work with the community, like with the early church academies, right? Coming together as members and saying, what do we want our school to be, right? It's okay, just outsource that to the government. Wow. People are like, are you kidding me? That's going to free up so many hours of my day. Okay, send the kids off. So now the kids are at school, the dad's at a job, and the mom's sitting here in this home that used to be a center of productivity and economic production and social and just full of life, a busy beehive, and now it's dead. There's nothing going on in there.
And when people are home at their families, most of the time the kids are off in their room playing whatever they're going to do. The they're doing something that he's got to do. The mom's doing her own thing.
Right.
And basically, there's hardly any interaction.
Yes.
One thing I love about the Amish type people and the Mennonites and so forth is their focus. Part of the reason why they build their houses with like one big room and then a bunch of really small little bedrooms around the outside of it, because they have a gathering space in their house.
Yeah. And I know that's how it's like at our house. It's almost like, why do we have all these bedrooms? Like no one's ever in them besides when they're sleeping. So then what happened was then we hit the mid 1900s, and you have now these women that have grown up in homes that were empty because they were at school or whatever, and then they hit and they're like, and everyone's just like, get married, and they're like, why?
What's the point of that?
And then you have women that I can understand and can relate to where they're like, well, I want to do something with my life besides bake cookies and do scrapbooks. Like I love kids. Like cookies are amazing and scrapbooks are fun. I'm an artistic person, but what I'm saying is this idea of just like, and then Satan was so smart too. He was like, well, there's women's world, there's the women's world, and there's the man's world. We got pink world and blue world, and they need to stay separate. So the woman's domain is in the kitchen, and the man's domain is the yard. And so like all these stereotypes started showing up that people are like, oh, that's a traditional family. And you're like, that's nowhere in the scriptures. And so what was really smart is then it left women with all this void. So then what does he do? The solution comes around with all these women that were actually mentored by communists. A lot of people don't realize that. Betty Friedan, they were all actually mentored by communists and sent to America. And then
Hillary Clinton. Oh, did I say that? No. Okay.
But they come, and Betty Friedan writes the Feminine Mystique, and she asks the brilliant question, like, there has to be more to life, right? Because it's all this aching women were already feeling, where they're feeling like, I'm not educating my kids. I don't have an economy. I don't have a home-based ministry. Like everything's gone and I'm doing nothing with my life besides my nails, and I want to do something more. So then Satan's like, right, the solution is let's get rid of the family. It was patriarchy that did this to you. It was Christianity and their stupid family order that did this to you. When really, that's the solution. Yeah. Satan always takes the solution and makes it the problem. So then they're like, that's right. We were all like victimized. Okay. And that's how you have second wave feminism with the ERA and everything. So Satan was brilliant. He started with legitimate problems because we moved away from God's family economy. Then there were problems and we were suffering those problems. And then Satan's like, here's the solution. And it's not really the solution. So if we can get back to...
the opposite of the solution. Yeah.
Yeah. If we can get back to this family order where fathers understand their role and women understand their role, and it's women, yes, have claim on their husbands, but nobody's idling. The children aren't idling either. Children should be an asset and not a liability. So
back in the days with the farming and so forth, I mean,
yeah.
there was some alternative reason to having children in the first place, because you needed additional farm help.
Yeah.
Because
well,
one
honestly,
guy
at our
can't
house,
take care of a whole farm.
I'm
it's really difficult.
I'm constantly saying, like, we really need more kids, because there is no way we can do all the Joseph Smith Foundation projects that I envision without more kids. Like, I'm literally starving. Like, if people want to get rid of their kids, like, you know where to send them. I'm just going to say that. So...
Okay, all right. Well, we got to wrap this up, but listen, thank you so much, Hannah, for coming and spending this time with us. And that was
thanks for letting me talk.
Fantastic stuff. As you can tell, we're pretty, we're pretty conservative as far as our mindset. Meaning conservative, meaning traditional.
Yeah.
I think that
scriptures have the answer.
Way of doing it, the setup of the family. Works. If you want to know God's way of having a family set up,
yes.
then read the proclamation on the family. That is so succinct and just so clear.
The Book of Mormon,
the scriptures and so forth are clear, and let's go out and let's try to make our families stronger and better, and encourage people and promote and talk about the family and why this is so important.
Yes.
You hardly even hear that anymore in our society today. It's all about just me, and everybody wants to identify themselves based on whatever particular preference they have, on their stuff. So. It's just it's a sad state of affairs that we're in, but this is where we're at, and
I am seeing a revival begin. Honestly, 15 years ago, there was I've been amazed in the last 15. Yeah, there are families changing, and we're gonna make a difference. We're gonna bear out the kingdom, so don't lose hope.
All right, so hang in there, everybody. So thank you so much again. Thank Hannah for being here for the podcast. We hope that you're enjoying those. If you're liking these podcasts, if there's something that's new, and hopefully every time there's some new things that you're going to find out as you go through these, please give us the thumbs up. Okay, give us the an attaboy or whatever, attagirl. Okay, on these podcasts, and thanks for taking the time to watch them. Please share them with other people, your friends and your neighbors and your members of your ward or whatever that you feel like would be blessed by having some additional information here. And we try to be scripture-based, prophet-based, and not we don't go, into we don't like the philosophies of men, and we don't like the progressive ideas that move us away from the things that God has already established. So that's kind of where we're at. If that's how you feel about it as well, then please like us and subscribe to the channel and so forth. And thank you so much for that. We got our conference going to be coming up here in September, so we're excited about that. And till next week.
Thanks so much, Rod.
Take care.